Hi everyone, nice to see so many people here today. A few preliminaries before I get started. Firstly, my name is Adrian Hill. I'm a Triratna Buddhist here at Sydney Buddhist Centre. And if I look nervous, it's because I am. Just a few little things to get out of the way. Firstly, I do have a bit of an English accent. Sometimes people can find that a bit distracting. And there is an aisle in between the chairs, and I'll get to why that's there in a minute. And a quick apology right at the start, which you're not supposed to do, but anyway. Forgive the number of lists in this talk. Apparently Buddhists love lists. This one certainly seems to. So, the title of the talk, Trauma and the Dharma, which is a bit of a, just trying to make that sound good. What it's really about is trauma and mindfulness of breathing meditation. So how do they affect each other and what can you do about it? So it is a bit of a dark topic. I have to acknowledge that. So I'm going to try and keep it light this morning, and I won't be going into the nitty-gritty of trauma. But having said that, all of you are free to leave at any point. No one's going to judge you if you leave. Please make self-care your first priority. That's why the aisle is there. You won't go to many talks where you're encouraged to leave right at the start, but this is one of them. And having said that, there are two support people here, Budankapali and Shannon. And if you feel the need to speak to someone later, they are there for you after the talk. I'm not a mental health professional, but they are. So I'm going to start now with a very short meditation, just a chance to tune in to your breath. So if you could just get comfortable in your chairs, and it's just going to be a couple of minutes, just a chance to tune in and get a relationship with your breath before we start the talk. So I'll ring the bell, and at the start and the end. So trauma and the Dharma, trauma and meditation. Why are we talking about that? So some people can stir up experiences of trauma during meditation, most likely on a longer retreat, but not necessarily. It's possible that you may have trauma and not know it. Sometimes the symptoms of trauma can be quite subtle, but they may be more intrusive in your life. And these symptoms could be affecting your meditation. You may feel that the meditation is stirring up these feelings, but it may be just that the meditation is showing you what's already there. There are ways to manage these feelings, but the more aware you are of what's going on, the more you'll feel in control. And these feelings can be what we call Dharma doorways. So that's a chance to learn about yourself and your past. But it may also be true that you may need to find other ways outside of formal meditation to practice mindfulness. And I'll get to that later. So a quote from the famous Buddhist songwriter Leonard Cohen. It's through the broken places that the light shines through. So what is trauma? What are we talking about? I've got a definition here from the Australian Childhood Foundation. Trauma is the emotional, psychological, and physiological residue left over from heightened stress that accompanies experiences of threat, violence, and life-challenging events. There's a few points I wanted to draw out of that. The event may have been violent or abusive, but it can also include more passive things like neglect. And it can happen in adulthood or childhood. Another point is that one event might be experienced as traumatizing by one person, but another person might experience no trauma at all. So it's just, we're all different. We all respond differently to different stimuli. Recognizing trauma. We've talked about trauma as a residue. What are we talking about? I've got a list of symptoms here, and I want to stress that it's just a list of symptoms. I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not saying that if you have any of these symptoms, you have trauma. That's up to you and whoever you choose to speak to determine that. So I'm just going to list the symptoms that you might notice within meditation. So on the physical level, he says, raising his voice a little bit, you might notice unexplained body pain. Maybe you've talked to your doctor, they can't explain it. You might notice over-breathing, sweaty skin, and a racing heart. Someone once told me these are the key signs to look for of trauma in meditation. You might experience a sense of threat or alarm in the body. And you might feel spaced out or numb. And a note for experienced meditators here, Joseph Goldstein talks about trauma as a possible cause of torpor. On the emotional level, you might notice anxiety, guilt, or shame. You might notice feeling overwhelmed or hopeless. And on the level of the mind, you might notice excessive self-judgment. Now, I don't know what counts as excessive self-judgment, so again, that's something to talk to a professional about. And you might notice flashbacks, what we call flashbacks. They're thoughts, images, sounds, or physical sensations that remind you of the past. But the good news is that all these symptoms can potentially be worked through. You're not stuck with them forever. And I'll come back to that. So that's the dark bit of the talk out the way. So I'd like you all to stand up and have a stretch. And if you feel like it, have a bit of a jiggle. And sit down. Okay, so recovery, we're into the light. So a lot of this section is based on a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He's the founder and medical director of the Trauma Center in Boston, USA. And my friend Dr. Bessel gave us a roadmap of 4 elements of recovery from trauma. He said for most people, this involves, number 1, finding a way to become calm and focused. Number 2, learning to maintain that calm in response to images, thoughts, sounds, or physical sensations that remind you of the past. Number 3, finding a way to be fully alive in the present and engaged with the people around you. Number 4, not having to keep secrets from yourself, including secrets about the ways that you have managed to survive. So that all sounds great, doesn't it? But how do you do that? How do you find that calm, that ability to self-regulate? Bessel van der Kolk goes on to say, intensive meditation has a positive effect on exactly those brain areas that are critical for physiological self-regulation. Actions that involve noticing and befriending the sensations in our bodies can produce profound changes in both mind and brain that can lead to healing from trauma. I'll have some of that. But some people can find that meditation, rather than helping them self-regulate, can actually make the symptoms of trauma worse. Bodily sensations can feel scary, hence the title of this book, Body Keeps the Score. And some people can find that focusing on the breath can be a trigger for feelings of trauma. So the final section, dealing with trauma in meditation. There's lots and lots of ideas out there on how to do that. And I don't know what's going to work for you. Everyone's different. But I'm going to cover 3 broad suggestions that might help. First category, if you like, find a therapist or guide who understands both trauma and meditation. It may be possible to work through your symptoms if you have a good therapist. They can help turn feelings of trauma into Dharma doorways, opportunities to grow. Second category, in breathing meditation, mindfulness of breathing, take it slowly and gently. As one meditation here likes to point out, there's no need to get the crowbar out. We all know who that is. We're not trying to force anything to happen. We're not trying to dive headlong into our pain. There's a nice quote here from W.H. Auden, the American poet, about approaching the truth at a gentle pace. He says, "Truth, like love and sleep, resents approaches that are too intense." I love that quote. And just finally, regarding breathing meditation, if it is getting a bit intense, you might try opening your eyes. You might try meditating for shorter blocks of time, or perhaps having a focus on your whole body rather than just one specific area. That worked well for me when I was just starting. Finally, if breathing meditation is too hard, maybe you could practice mindfulness in other ways. So there are other types of meditation such as self-metta. I've been doing a lot of that this week to try and handle my nerves. And if you want to know more about self-metta, speak to an order member here. They've got the case around the neck. You might try guided meditation or walking meditation. You might try a different anchor other than the breath. Some people use external sounds or music. Some people like chanting mantras or focusing on an image or a mirror. And you might try mindfulness in daily life, perhaps when you're knitting or doing household chores, going for a mindful walk and taking in nature. Or you might choose reading about trauma or the Dharma. Bessel van der Kolk recommends art, yoga, and dancing. And finally, on a personal note, I've found being a part of the Sangha here to be very grounding and heart-opening, which helps with meditation. So that's it. Hopefully that's given you a broad overview of trauma and meditation. Thanks for your attention. We have some questions that I'll just read out. And I've got copies here for the discussion group leaders. Was there ever a time when you noticed yourself overreacting to things? What was it about that situation? And how did you calm yourself down? Second question, what are some of the ways you deal with intense feelings in your meditation practice? And thirdly, what are your favorite self-care strategies? That's it.